In Africa today, few leaders generate more excitement and more controversy than Ibrahim Traoré. To millions across the continent, he is the young revolutionary captain standing up to France, rejecting Western influence and reclaiming African sovereignty. At just 34 years old, he has become the world's youngest head of state. He speaks the language of Pan-African pride. He wears military fatigues instead of expensive suits. And for many frustrated young Africans, he looks like the future. But history wants us to be careful when crowds become worshipping strongmen, because Africa has seen this story before. A young military leader arrives promising liberation, promising dignity, promising national rebirth, only to slowly dismantle democracy, silence opposition, weaken institutions, and drag nations deeper into authoritarian rule. From Simon Doe in Liberia to Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, to military ruler across Africa's post-colonial history, the revolutionary often becomes the leader he once claimed to fight. And now many analysts are asking, is Ibrahim Traoré truly building a new Africa, or is Burkina Faso becoming another warning sound for the continent? Ibrahim Traoré came to power in 2022 after overthrowing fellow military leader Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. That alone tells you something important. Burkina Faso was already under military rule. Traoré did not overthrow a dictatorship to restore democracy. He overthrew another junta leader because many soldiers believed that the government was failing to stop jihadist violence. And to understand why he became popular, you have to understand the desperation inside of Burkina Faso. Large parts of the country have been devastated by Islamic insurgency, insurgency linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS-affiliated groups. Millions are being displaced. Thousands have been killed. Public confidence in civilian politicians collapsed. France, once seen as the security guarantor in the Sahel, became deeply unpopular. Into that chaos stepped Ibrahim Traoré. Young, charismatic, anti-French, military, confident. He presented himself as the new Thomas Sankara. And that comparison matters because Thomas Sankara remains one of Africa's most iconic revolutionary figures. Sankara promoted self-reliance, anti-imperialism, women's rights, and national dignity. Traoré understood the emotional power of that symbolism, and millions of Africans embraced it. To understand Traoré honestly, we must acknowledge why many Africans admire him, because some of his actions resonate deeply across the continent, challenging French influence. Traoré openly challenged France's long-standing dominance in West Africa. For decades, many Africans argued that former colonial powers maintained excessive political, military, and economic influence in the region. Traoré tapped into that frustration. He expelled French military forces from Burkina Faso and repositioned the country toward alternative partnerships to supporters that represented psychological decolonization. Promoting resource nationalism, Traoré has emphasized greater national control over Burkina Faso's resources, especially gold. Many Africans believe multinational corporations extract wealth while local population remain poor. His rhetoric surrounding economic sovereignty therefore has gained strong support among youth movement, reviving Pan-African language. Traoré consistently speaks about African dignity, sovereignty, and independence at the time when many young Africans feel disconnected from traditional political elite. His language feels emotionally powerful. This is especially true on social media, where he has become a near mythological figure. Regional security cooperation. Burkina Faso, alongside Mali and Niger, has attempted to coordinate security responses against jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel. Supporters argue that regional government needed faster military coordination than traditional diplomatic organizations were providing. But this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable, because charisma is not democracy, popularity is not institutional building, and anti-colonial rhetoric does not automatically produce good governance. In fact, history has shown that the opposite can happen. One of the biggest concerns surrounding Traoré is the growing normalization of military rule in West Africa. Burkina Faso has suspended democratic constitutional order. Political reform and freedom has been narrowed. Journalists and critics have reportedly faced intimidation, and increasingly the state revolves around the image of one man. This is dangerous for any country. Many of Traoré's supporters openly argue that Western-style democracy has failed Africa. And yes, African democracy faces serious corruption and governance problems. But eliminating pluralism creates even bigger dangers. When opposition parties weaken, when the military dominates politics, when criticism becomes unpatriotic, nations stop developing accountable institutions. Instead, they become personality cults, and personality cults almost always end badly. Africa already experienced decades of military strongmen after independence. The result wasn't continental greatness. The result was coups, corruption, economic collapse, civil wars, and institutional decay. The danger is that Traoré's model encourages a new generation to romanticize authoritarianism. Another major concern is Burkina Faso's break from the economic community of West African states. Alongside Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso withdrew from ECOWAS and formed the alliance of Sahel states. Supporters call this liberation from foreign-controlled regional politics. But critics argue this move weakens African integration. And this point is important because Africa already struggles with fragmentation, too many borders, too many competing blocks, too many disconnected economies. Weak regional coordination is one reason intra-Africa trade remains low as compared to Europe and Asia. So one state becoming splintering away from regional institutions instead of reforming it internally, Africa risks becoming even more divided. Regional integration requires compromise, diplomacy, and institutional continuity. Military nationalism often undermines those things. When Simon Doe seized power in Liberia in 1980, many celebrated him. He was young, military, anti-establishment. He overthrew an entrenched elite. To ordinary people, he looked like a revolutionary correction to injustice. But over time, Liberia descended into repression, ethnic favoritism, institutional collapse, and eventually catastrophic civil war. The revolutionary became authoritarian. The state weakened, and Liberia paid the price for decades. No two leaders are the same, though. But Africa's history repeatedly shows that military savior often centralize power rather than build durable institutions. Then there is the Museveni lesson. When Museveni came to power in 1986, he was praised internationally as part of a new generation of African reformers. He promised democracy and stability after years of chaos. And initially, many Ugandan saw real progress. But nearly 4 decades later, Uganda remains dominated by a single leader. Opposition figures face pressure, institutions heavily around presidential power, and the revolutionary image that once inspired people gradually transform into entrenched political control. This is one of Africa's revolving political tragedy. Liberators who never learn how to leave power. Another issue is the mythology surrounding Traoré online. Across Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and X, Traoré is often portrayed almost as a superhero. Some video falsely claim he has transformed Burkina Faso into an economic miracle overnight. Others spread misinformation or fabricated speeches. This creates a dangerous political culture where symbolism replaces facts. Strong nations are not built through viral clips. They are built through courts, courts, university, independent media, stable constitutions, professional civil services, regional cooperation, economic diversification, and peaceful transfers of powers. These things are less exciting than revolutionary speeches, but they matter more. They matter far more. Africa's future will not be secured by military strongmen alone. The continent needs security, yes, but it also needs democratic resilience, economic integration, industrialization, stable institutions, and continental cooperation. That means strengthening organizations like the African Union and reforming regional blocks, not fragmenting them further. Because the regional economy rewards skill, fragmentation, weakening bargaining power, and political instability scares away long-term investment. Africa already lost decades to coups and military rule during the Cold War era. Many fear the continent could repeat that cycle. Ibrahim Traoré represents something very important, real. African frustration with foreign influence, frustration with corruption, frustration with insecurity, frustration with weak post-colonial governance. That frustration is legitimate, but history teaches us an important lesson. A leader can speak the language of liberation while simultaneously weakening the foundations of democracy. And one nation begin placing their faith entirely in strong men instead of institution, the outcome is really freedom. The real question is not whether Traoré is popular today. The real question is whether Burkina Faso will emerge stronger institutionally 10 years from now. Because history remembers not only who seized power, but what kind of state they ultimately built. Do you believe Ibrahim Traoré is leading a true African renaissance, or is Burkina Faso repeating an old political cycle in a new uniform? If you enjoy deep geopolitical analysis on Africa and global power shift, subscribe to When the Dust Settles, because the story is never over until the dust settles. My name is Pico Conway, and you're watching When the Dust Settles. Have a great day. Bye for now.